Welcome to week 2 of our Advanced Care Planning 2016 course, Enough Theory, How Do I Do It Already? This mini lecture series will take you through the PowerPoint presentation entitled Planning and Prevention, POAs, Capacity, and More that you should have in your materials. Our learning goals today will be considering how powers of attorney work, what can they be used for? How can they be used and misused? And we'll look at kind of some of the issues associated with advanced care planning, primarily around health and personal care decision making. But of course, we will also talk about some financial issues of powers of attorney. Now remember, while I am speaking to powers of attorney, and I'll refer to the Ontario legislation, for our colleagues across the country, I know that we have someone from New Brunswick as part of our course, I will be referring to some of the other information as well in the different jurisdictions. Remembering again, advanced care planning concepts are really pretty much the same across the country, but they do have different legislation according to which jurisdiction. So, what about capacity? Turning to the second slide. Well, we've talked a bit before about how you as a capable person, you get to decide. And you see in front of you a square with capable and incapable on the top two parts, and you decide and somebody else decides on the bottom two parts. What's important here is that a capable adult, you, get to make the decision. So the line that goes across is really the line about who gets to decide. Drop down. Is it you as an adult, or is it somebody else who gets to make the decision? Imagine the line that goes vertically as the big yellow bus. You cross the street. From one side of the street, you're perfectly capable, and you go to the other side of the street and you get hit by a bus and become perfectly incapable. So you literally are in a coma and unconscious. Well, as we learned last week, you are, of course, allowed to treat if there's an emergency. So you don't have to be worrying about trying to get some type of substituted consent for an emergency. But if you are an incapable person, you're completely in a coma, someone else is going to have to decide for you. So this is a refresher back to what we learned last week. What we're going to be talking about is what is a power of attorney and how does that fall into the framework of somebody else deciding. So moving to the next slide, which says what is a power of attorney. So again, refreshing your memory, powers of attorney are legal documents that you can create in every jurisdiction in the country, and they're slightly different in each jurisdiction. But what they do is they allow you as a capable person in that box to pick somebody else to be your substitute decision maker. And this really will be who you go to as a healthcare provider or as a financial person when you're trying to find out who a decision gets to be made for. And you'll remember that there are different kinds of powers of attorney. There are two main kinds. There's the power of attorney for health and personal care, which in, as I said, British Columbia is called a representation agreement, and same with the Yukon. And there's a power of attorney for property. And those are two separate documents. And so when you, as a person who's trying to take instruction, is trying to figure out which document or which power of attorney is it anyway, when I'm trying to understand what am I supposed to do, it's always critically important to have a look at the document itself. And don't be shy on a practical basis for saying, it's great that you are here, Mr. Jones or Mrs. Jones, but I need to see the power of attorney document that gives you the authority that you say you have to make decisions on behalf of this person, this client, this patient. And then you need to look at the power of attorney document and see, is it one that covers health and personal care decisions, or is it one that covers property? Sometimes they'll have two documents appointing the same person, but that's fine. People innocently misunderstand. They often think a power of attorney, if they get it, it's one thing. So they may say that they're a power of attorney, and you look at the document and you find that it's actually a power of attorney for property issues. And what you need is a power of attorney for a health and personal care decision. So you may have to go back on a practical basis and say, look, thank you, I really appreciate this. Our billing department will be very keen to have this on file if there's a financial matter. But what we need is the power of attorney document for health and personal care that lets you be the decision maker for health and personal care decisions. They may or may not have that. What we've learned is that if they don't have that, then it's going to go to a default substitute decision list. So let's move over to the next slide, powers of attorney, financial only. So again, there are different kinds of financial powers of attorney. And you can see in the slide that there are the, quote, regular kinds of powers of attorney. And these aren't used very much anymore because we tend to have credit cards and Visa cards and debit cards and all kinds of ways of transferring money. But years ago, where credit cards and so on and online banking didn't exist, things weren't so easy. And so you literally have a power of attorney to allow you as a substitute decision maker to go to the grocery store or to go to the bank or to pay the insurance of somebody. And as you can see, if you hit your advance button, that it's active right away and the arrow ends at the vertical line. If you move to the next slide on continuing, or in some jurisdictions they're called enduring powers of attorney, and you hit the forward button, you'll see that they're active right away. They're active the moment they're created, and it continues past that point where the big yellow buses hit you, and you're into the point of incapability. Now, most people use these documents. The danger is that they can be used by somebody for financial purposes if you are still capable. Now, there can be good reasons for doing that. You may want someone to be able to step in or give you a hand on an intermittent basis, or you might be down in Florida somewhere and you want someone to be able to take care of your finances on a continuing basis, back and forth. And it may allow somebody the opportunity to get used to making substitute decisions. So there can be a good reason to do it. Having said that, it does expose you to letting someone make decisions for you while you're still capable. The next slide says springing powers of attorney. And think about this as the credit card that you get that says only active after you've phoned the 1-800 number. So you'll see as you move the slide forward that it's dormant, it sleeps until some kind of action springs it into effect, whether that is a finding of incapacity or some other thing that you have indicated in the power of attorney document. Rarely, but sometimes they'll say that if a person's been kidnapped or there's ransom, if you live or work in a war-torn country, that it can spring into effect for that purpose. But really, mostly it's for some type of incapacity. So again, it sleeps until it springs to life. On a practical basis, that means that nobody can make a decision for you about your finances while you are capable, and only after a certain designated event will it be then useful. I include a limited power of attorney in here just because it can be useful to know about. You may have actually used one before. This is where you have something for a very specific purpose or a specific moment in time. And if you move the slide forward, you'll see that the arrow begins and ends while the person is capable. So here's an example. I'm going to my cottage, but I need someone to pay my insurance while I'm away. The renewal happens to be coming up on my car insurance, and I need someone to do that for me. I can write a power of attorney that allows a person to do a particular thing. That's a limited power of attorney. They're not that common, but they certainly can exist. So I just want you to move to the next slide, which says Nexus of Capability, Financial POA. It's important to see that if you're a capable person, again, this is just an expanded list of the one that we saw earlier, you decide. If you're an incapable person, again, you'll see that there's this default list. Now, as we may remember, there is a default substitute decision list for healthcare issues. So we have in the Healthcare Consent Act this default list that we went through before. You'll note that in financial issues, a guardian is a court-appointed person. They're very rare, but they can exist. Then it's your attorney pursuant to a power of attorney. But then there's no default. From a practical approach, many people will think that it will be the son or daughter or, quote, next of kin, which I hope that we don't use that term, but they think that it's going to be the spouse or somebody else will naturally fill the role of a substitute decision maker for finance. It's not the case. In fact, it will go to the public guardian and trustee, and then the public guardian trustee will try to find somebody else to do it, likely somebody who's close to you and knows what you want. So moving To our review of power of attorney slips, this is again for financial, you'll see that the 4 different kinds are listed, and you have the kind of regular powers of attorney. Again, to refresh your memory, that's that kind of walking around document that we mostly don't use today because we have other ways of transferring money, but it's only active while the person is capable, and it ends at the point of incapacity. We have a enduring or continuing power of attorney, 2 names for the same thing, and that's active right away and it continues on past the point of incapability. We have a springing power of attorney for finance, which sleeps and then comes into effect upon incapacity, and this limited power of attorney, which is really for kind of one purpose only. And we're going to just stop this mini video here and continue with the second one at how can powers of attorney be used and misused.